Good morning, everybody. I welcome all councillors and members of the public to the latest meeting of the North Northamptonshire Executive, including all those watching the meeting via the live stream on YouTube. Members are reminded to keep your microphones muted unless invited to speak. Prior to starting today's meeting, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the grievous events that occurred on Bondi Beach in Australia on the 14th of December. The attack on the Jewish community during Hanukkah was a reprehensible and senseless act of violence. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies are with all those affected, and we reaffirm our solidarity with the Jewish community at this time of profound sorrow. I now invite everyone to join me in observing a minute's silence in remembrance of the victims of this atrocious attack. Thank you very much. So we come to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Brian Bennyworth and also Camilla Coulson-Patel and David Watts.
Thank you very much for that. Agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November 2025. The minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of November are set out on pages 5 to 28 of the agenda pack. Are there any comments in respect of their accuracy? I can see no hands. Please may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes. Councillor Kirk Harrison and Councillor Jan O'Hara. Approval of the minutes have been moved and seconded. Please may I have a show for those in favour.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you for that. I'll sign the minutes. Those along, if you may. Thank you. So now we come to agenda item 3, which is members' declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members? I can see no hands. So now we come to agenda item 4, notifications of requests to address the meeting. We have received requests to speak on agenda items 5, 6, 7 and 10. The speaker will be invited to address the executive in turn at the appropriate point in accordance with part 2, paragraph 8.12 of the Constitution. Speakers are reminded that participation at executive is limited to statements only, which may be taken into account following officer presentation of the report and during member debate. So now we come to agenda item 5, which is the 2026-27 Budget Scrutiny Panel, Interim Observations and Recommendations. I would like to invite first Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting. Lynn, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to make your statement.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Chair, members, I want to start by recognising the serious amount of work the Scrutiny panel has put into this interim review. This isn't a tick box report, it's a line-by-line evidence-led challenge that actually strengthens the Council's financial governance, and that deserves credit. But the findings also tell us something uncomfortable. We still don't have a financial system that fully corrects risk, delivery and savings, and until we fix that, we're going to keep firefighting rather than planning. The panel is absolutely right to highlight the pressure points, particularly the reoccurring savings that haven't materialised year after year. A savings target isn't a saving, it's a hope, and hopes don't balance budgets. If delivery confidence isn't there, we need honesty early, not crisis late. The report also exposes weaknesses in pipeline management. Too many savings depend on external factors, market conditions, workforce availability, or partner performance, and yet we still badge them as green. Scrutiny is right to challenge that optimism bias. If something is high risk, call it high risk. Residents will forgive bad news before they forgive bad planning. I also want to back the panel's point on transformation. We can't keep rebadging cost avoidance as transformation or using one-off fixes to patch structural gaps. True transformation is redesign, not rearrangement, and unless we protect capacity in the core team, we will never achieve the scale of change needed to stabilise the budgets. So my ask today is simple. Back the panel, implement their recommendations at pace and commit to a financial framework that links performance, cost delivery, risk and timelines transparently, so Scrutiny can do its job and residents can trust the budget. This interim report is a warning light, but it's also a roadmap. If we take it seriously, next year's budget doesn't have to be another damage limitation exercise. It can actually be stable, credible, and grounded in delivery, not wishful thinking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Lynn. And as a former chair of Scrutiny, it is kind of you to recognise the hard work of our officers and scrutineers who have worked tirelessly on this. So thank you. I would now like to invite Councillor Jim Hakewell as Chair of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair, and equally my thanks to Lynn Buckingham for her kind comments. It has, in my opinion, been a very honest and, in today's meeting, a transparent process that we've carried out. So thank you, Leader, for allowing me to come along today and present the findings of our scrutiny, which has been published in your reports for today's meeting. I'm very happy to receive questions, whatever the protocol is, but as I conclude, if there are any questions, very happy to receive them today, and equally very happy at any time to receive any questions from executive members. So, Leader, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee has carried out a very thorough scrutiny process based on resolutions from our meeting of the 26th of August, which were accepted by the Executive Committee, your committee, on the 11th of September. The committee decided to carry out its main detailed scrutiny prior to the publication of the draft budget, with our conclusions published last week in your agenda and being considered today as the wider consultation with the community begins. Our committee met on 4 occasions between 29th October and 24th of November, with our recommendations set out in Section 5 of this report before you today. Our detailed minutes are set out in the appendices A to D on pages 49 to 71 of this report. Committee members have had the opportunity to support your executive's budget policy development focused on areas of key risks to the Council's 26-27 budget, rather than a wider review of all budget lines in previous years. This focused approach has been well received by our corporate committee members. Excuse me. Our findings were concluded before the outcome of the local government finance settlement was known, and hence we have not fully scrutinised the whole of the draft budget, as all the information was just not available at the time. To enable the additional government settlement to be scrutinised, we have scheduled a meeting of corporate scrutiny on the 15th of January, from which we will update the Executive Committee on the 10th of February. The recommendations we would ask you to consider are in section 3 of the report today on page 30 to 31. We would like you to note the Budget Scrutiny Panel and the work we have undertaken. Note and thank officers of the Council, particularly those in finance and the Northampton Children's Trust, for their hard work. Consider and respond to key findings and specific recommendations from the Budget Scrutiny Panel's work and to date, as set out in section 5. Note the minutes of the Budget Scrutiny A to D in your appendices. Note the Corporate Scrutiny Committee will meet on the 15th of January to further consider the draft budget. And lastly, item F agrees that a report be made to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in respect of the progress of the delivery of its recommendations after 6 months from when this budget comes into place on April the 1st, so that we have a half-yearly report and we can scrutinise that to match it against what we're saying today. Excuse me. The process we followed is in section 4 at 4.9, and the objectives were to evaluate and challenge the robustness and sustainability of aspects of the proposed budget, identify systemic risks and key opportunities to enhance the financial resilience and drive innovation, to deliver constructive evidence-led observations and recommendations to enhance service delivery and outcomes for our residents, and to align scrutiny with the Council's statutory responsibilities, long-term strategic vision and key priorities. So we have been working through on the Council's policies and indeed, Leader, the corporate plan, newly agreed and approved last week. The panel commenced with a review of the in-year position. So we looked at how things were going for this year, 25-6, as we then templated that into the future. The 3 areas, major areas, risk-based areas, will come as no surprise to any member in this room or any officer. Adult social care costs, 152 million. Northamptonshire Children's Trust contract sum of 82 million. That's our share of the whole of Northamptonshire. And travel to school transport, 21 million in the budget. Excuse me. We also looked at draft budget changes for the general fund, and in that area we looked at 3 areas: the dedicated schools grant, the housing revenue account, and the capital programme, both for the general programme and for the housing revenue and the housing revenue account. The recommendations that we are making to the Executive are set out in section 5, commencing on page 38. That commences with the portfolio holder for children's services at 5.7, adults and health partnerships at 5.9. From our housing briefing, our recommendations are at 5.11. And in relation to our scrutiny of the dedicated schools grant, our recommendations are in 5.13. Place and economy conclusions are at 5.15. Sounds like some obscure marking system, doesn't it? But anyway, those are the items within the report that we produced. Subsequent to our initial scrutiny panel meetings, we met again on the 3rd of December to review our findings and make the recommendations to the executive that's detailed in the report before you. In addition, on the 3rd of December, at that meeting, the Executive Director for Finance presented new, additional information to the panel that reflected the latest intelligence from the government in respect of North Northamptonshire's provisional allocation under the local government settlement, which is due to be published later this week. As a result of the new information from government, after our scrutiny, main scrutiny, we have made recommendations in paragraph 5.20. So 5.20 perhaps are the key recommendations just to articulate and verbalise here. That the portfolio holder for finance efficiency and change ensures that all councillors receive clear and accessible communication during the budget setting process, outlining key financial information to enable them to support residents effectively. We're very much aware we are 68 councillors and we all get asked questions about the budget. So a good flow of information is important, and the committee felt that the portfolio holder finance efficiency and change provides all councillors with regular, concise financial update briefings, such as a newsletter, we thought, to maintain awareness of the key budget issues throughout the year, once again that we can be well informed as we talk to our residents. That the leader of the council be recommended to write to all local members of parliament that serve our physical geography, to encourage them to highlight to the government the implications of late and volatile national funding announcements, and to advocate for greater stability, transparency and fairness within the local government finance system. We had a great deal of debate in our corporate scrutiny about the way in which it affects our officers, yourselves as an executive and scrutiny, to have information coming very late, and that information changing quite dynamically between different government announcements, not least of which we're sitting here today knowing that more information comes this week. That the executive be mindful of the heightened risk levels arising from the evolving national funding position and ensures it is fully cognizant of all possible options at its disposal that could be implemented, if required, to safeguard the Council's financial resilience. I know, Leader, you go to various national organisations, and other colleagues on the executive do. The local government landscape is most uncertain, and I know you bring that back to North Northamptonshire. So the changing funding decisions from central government will require the executive to investigate all the opportunities to meet savings targets across the statutory and non-statutory services we provide. This should significantly, the committee feels, include partners, most particularly the Northamptonshire Children's Trust, who you might say is a partner or might say is part of us, but critical area there. There are pressures across all services, not least from inflation, and that inflation is not only the headline inflation, but super inflation on things like building projects and where we're carrying out capital work. Our money goes less far, and scrutiny identified that. And equally, contracts that we hold and have to renegotiate in the future, which includes uplifts and inflationary pressures that we may not be aware of. We all await the final government settlement later this week, which will no doubt need the same close scrutiny as described in this report today. Our scrutiny committee will be very willing to scrutinise changes as they happen, both during the budget setting process and throughout the year ahead, or should I say years ahead. I would like to thank members of the committee for their diligence, cross-party, working earnestly together to get the best for our residents, and their input into the scrutiny process detailed in this report, as well as our officer colleagues for providing the financial information and being willing and able to answer the many questions that we asked. And some of those colleagues are here, and I hope you pass that on to other colleagues as well. not least Chris Stevenson, Raj and Callum, who managed to bring us together at the right times, in the right meetings, in the right places, and have significantly helped in the writing of this report. Lastly, Leader, I would like to thank you and your executive colleagues around the table today for coming to our scrutiny meetings and hearing the discussions as they took place and are now detailed in these pages. There will always be a welcome for you, your input at our corporate scrutiny meetings. We will always be keen to hear from you as to areas you would like us to scrutinise for you prior to making decisions. So, Leader and Executive, thank you very much for enabling me to present committee's recommendations here today, and I remain available to answer any questions, or indeed, as the process goes forward, to receive any questions from you. And that's my report. Somewhat lengthy, but it was a long process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hakewell, for that report. And I'll say it again, and I'm sure I say it on behalf of the Executive, that we truly welcome cross-party scrutiny here at North Northamptonshire Council. And I will be having something to say about the government settlement later in this meeting. So thank you for that. I'd now like to invite members to debate from the floor. Councillor Graham Cheatley.
Chair, members, I welcome this interim report from the Budget Scrutiny Panel. I want to place on record my thanks to the Chair, Councillor Hakewell, the panel members and to officers, particularly Finance and the Children's Trust, for the work done to date. What I particularly support is the risk-based approach to scrutiny. Instead of spreading effort thinly, the panel has focused on the areas that genuinely drive our financial risk. To put that into context, Councillor Hakewell's already mentioned it, but I'll mention it again, it's worth it. That in 2025-26, the net general fund budget is 405.5 million. And of that 255 million, around 63% of the entire budget sits in just 3 demand-led areas: adult social care at 152 million, the Children's Trust contract at 82 million, and home to school transport at 21 million. Now, if those budgets move, everything else is secondary. So scrutiny in the right place really matters. The panel also correctly sets this in the national context. County and unitary councils face an estimated £20 billion funding gap this Parliament, rising to 54 billion over 5 years, with care services now accounting for around 68% of upper tier authority spend nationally. Locally, population growth and an ageing profile continue to drive demand, particularly in care, send and transport. In terms of planning assumptions, the report is clear. 4.99% council tax, an average band D of £1,918, a 3% pay award, and a projected 26-27 budget requirement of, since revised to 431 million, with an emerging 35.8 million savings challenge. I also support the panel's recommendations, particularly maintaining a robust reserve strategy and ensuring the finance portfolio holder, myself, receives regular updates on investor-safe proposals and emerging risks, especially as national funding detail becomes clearer. I also like the recommendation of me providing a regular update, newsletter or something like that in the future. It's a very good idea. This is an interim report completed before the full settlement picture. That's worthy of note. And the next stages of scrutiny are already built in. Overall, this is the right approach. It's focused, it's evidence-led and disciplined. And I'm very happy to support the report and its recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Any other members? Councillor Elizabeth Wright.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to reflect on the work of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in reviewing the 26-27 budget. So I took part in most of the scrutiny hearings because obviously my budget is Children's Services, Children's Trust, and I also have a particular interest in home to school transport. So I want to thank members for the depth and integrity they brought to this process. The scrutiny sessions were robust, thoughtful, and most importantly, focused on what matters, the people behind the numbers. I welcome the opportunity to respond to questions and provide clarity around some of the most challenging areas in our portfolio, including SEND provision, the high needs block, home to school transport, and the wider pressures on demand-led services. The report rightly highlights the importance of early intervention, sufficiency planning, and strong partnership working, especially at a time when budgets are under pressure and the needs of our communities are growing more complex. I'm also pleased to report that Children's Services are actively working on all the recommendations made out in the report, so we look forward to bringing that progress back to you. It was also encouraging to see cross-party recognition of the challenges we face and a shared commitment to ensuring that funding is used widely to support children and families across North Northamptonshire. So my thanks go to everyone involved, officers, members, and those who submitted feedback. And I am really pleased to second this report to the Executive.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Ken Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. I was extremely pleased, and I know it's been mentioned 2 or 3 times this morning, but I was extremely pleased to see that we are operating completely with transparency. I think that is very necessary, which in turn is the correct thing for us to be doing. Recommendations have been made to ensure that the Council complies with its constitutional legislative requirements. I'll get it quicker one day, for 26-27. And I am pleased to see that 63% of the whole budget would be scrutinised. Reference, for example, adult social care costs, Northants childcare, and travel to school transport. 3 of the most important things, I believe. I am glad to see that the budget scrutiny is being chaired by Councillor Jim Hakewell. I think he's probably the most competent member of this council to chair such an important panel. I therefore agree the recommendations made for this executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ken. Any other members? Councillor Chris McGiffin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Can I open by saying congratulations, and I applaud the work done by Jim and his team in Scrutiny. I attended one of the sessions and it was enlightening, and I have made a note or two. The principle that sits behind the way we're doing scrutiny just now, whereby we provide papers prior to executive making decision, is proven to work very well, wider than just on budget. Allow us to deal with potential issues which may be, that's the word I'm looking for, not so much overlooked, but considered less important, or perhaps not seen as high priority for members and officers. They're questioned in a practical, proactive process which allows for that word transparency and informed decision making. In this process, for instance, the panel teased out via their deep dive the work to be done by Empower, external body specialising in reducing costs to local councils, and who've worked very successfully with the Children's Trust and others. To address the issue of the cost of transport to school, a statutory obligation, of course, but one in which the cost was challenged by scrutiny. Following the questioning of scrutiny, the findings and outputs of the work by Empower will be reported back into scrutiny to ensure appropriate progress. I congratulate you again, Jim, and I applaud the work that's been done by the Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other members wish to add anything? In that case, I will, by saying that, following on from Lynn's comments earlier, we really do believe that 2026 will be the year of transformation. The foundations of an exemplary council exist. 2026 will be the year of transformation as we raise the ceiling and ultimately aim to raise the roof. So with that, we'll move to a proposer and seconder. I have it proposed by Councillor Graham Cheatley and seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Wright. Well, the recommendations are set out on pages 30 and 31 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I have a show for those in favour.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. So now we come, members, to agenda item 6, the draft budget 2025-26, the medium-term financial plan and the capital programme for 2026 to 2030. I would like to invite Lynn Buckingham to again address the meeting. Lynn, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to make your statement.
Thank you again very much. Before I start, I will just say I know how big the putting the budget together is and the work that goes on behind it. And that's seen in the papers today. My concerns are that taken together, these budget papers, including appendices A and B, don't just set a financial plan, they quietly transfer risk. And the key question is simple: who's being asked to absorb it and what will it cost us later? Appendix A balances the books through efficiencies, transformation and assumptions that demand can be managed. Appendix B then reassures us that the equality impact is overall positive or neutral. But when you line the two up, that reassurance doesn't hold, because the first group carrying the risk is disabled residents and those who rely on care. Adult social care is facing rising demand, inflation and workforce pressures, yet the plan relies on efficiency savings, increased client contributions and strengths-based practice to cope. Appendix B labels this as neutral impact. In reality, that means people feel the pressure first, and the council pays later through crisis care, delayed discharges and safeguarding costs. Next are children with SEND and their families. The paper acknowledges that EHCP numbers have more than doubled and that the high needs block is structurally overspent. Yet the response is placement reviews, alternative delivery models and deficit management, again described as neutral. But instability for families isn't neutral, and neither is the long-term costs when outcomes deteriorate. Then there are low-income working households at 4.99% council tax increase may be lawful, but it lands alongside rising fees and charges. Whilst council tax support is protected, many households just above the threshold will take the hit directly. Appendix B treats this as neutral without showing who actually pays, and neutrality without evidence is assumption, not analysis. We also see children and young people exposed through transport and services efficiencies, with no clear equality analysis of rural impact, disability or access. If those efficiencies reduce support, the cost doesn't disappear, it reappears in education outcomes and future demand. And finally, the biggest thing being thrown under the bus is next year's budget. Appendix B says no full equality impact assessment is needed at this stage.
10 seconds, Lynn.
But if equality risks aren't properly assessed now, they aren't priced in. They just come back later, bigger and more expensive. Thank you.
And thank you for that. I would now like to invite Claire Edwards, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce this report. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So the report today sets out the draft budget for 26-27 and the indicative medium-term financial plan for Northamptonshire Council. and it will form part of the basis for the consultation process, together with the capital programme for 26 to 2030. So what I would like to take your attention to is the report that's in Appendix A, and some of the significant issues that we're having to deal with in putting this budget together. So I'd like to take you to page 90. As we've already alluded to, there's been some significant issues in actually developing and pulling together the plan today that we present to you. So this gives you some of that national context, some of the significant challenges that us as North Northamptonshire and local government have faced in trying to deal with putting together a budget proposal for you today. One of the most notable challenges that we have within here is referred to as fair funding review. This has significantly impacted our ability to be able to project and model some of the outcomes of the policy statement and the budget that was published on the 20th of November and also on the 26th of November as well. So together with that and with all these items in here, it has been incredibly difficult to be able to ensure that we have a balanced budget, but we have achieved that. And I think that needs to be commended. And I think, you know, it's not a mean feat that needs to be dismissed that that's been achieved. So I think, you know, what we need to take a step back is also to look around some of the issues that we have in our funding. So I just wanted to take you to some of the highlights in this report. So I'll just move you to page 95. Just looking at some of the funding around that we have in terms of challenges. So as we've already alluded to, what we have is a balanced budget for 26-27, but as you'll see, rapidly increasing to a deficit in 28-29 and also in 29-30, up to about £35 million. So fundamentally, what we're seeing here is a budget that has a structural deficit. We still await the actual provisional financial settlement, and we hope that as North Northamptonshire this will improve. However, the medium term does look challenging, and we can't obviously dismiss that. So therefore, the future years will obviously ensure that we need to focus on that transformational plan. Some of the other issues that we need to be mindful of is when we put this budget together. Just again take you to some of the other pages within this around the medium-term financial plan, which is on the following page. So that just gives you a highlight of where we're seeing our costs increase to over the medium term. So at the moment we're looking at a balanced position of the £431 million rising to £519 million. Further on in the report, if we go to pages 103, of the report, we also see some of the funding that we have in here. And we'll see that that's also highlighting some of the issues that we're facing. Some of the other challenges that we see is around business rates reset. What we're seeing is a significant reduction for North Northamptonshire. So when we look at our funding envelope that is shown on page 106 of the report, we see that that has significantly changed. So our funding for business rates has reduced significantly, and for an area like North Northamptonshire that is receiving significant growth, that has significantly reduced and will continue to reduce and be impacted. So what we will see going forward into the medium term is a significant challenge in how we can actually balance our budgets. Some of the issues that we're also facing is around future elements in relation to some of the changes that we're seeing in the funding structure and some of the levies that we see being placed on some of the business rates as well. So what I would like to draw your attention to then is also the capital programme that's within here, and it's got a significant investment requirement over the next 4 years. So we're seeing investments of about £228 million, focusing on highways and children's schools. And therefore, I'd like to take any questions or happy to move to the recommendations.
Thank you for that report, Claire. I'd now like to invite members to debate from the floor. Any members wish? Councillor Graham Cheatley.
Chair, members, I want to place on record my support for the draft budget the medium-term financial plan and capital programme that are before us today. This is a substantial and technically robust piece of work, produced in an environment of exceptional financial uncertainty for local government, as Claire's alluded to. This is a serious and realistic financial plan produced in a very challenging national context. It does not rely on optimism or unconfirmed government funding, but it sets out the position as it genuinely is. I need to thank Claire and all of her team in the finance for putting together this report. I've almost felt the work that's been involved physically. The net revenue budget requirement for 26-27 is £431 million, up from £405.5 million this year. Now that increase is driven overwhelmingly, as we've already said, by demand-led pressures, particularly in adult social care, children's services, SEND and home-to-school transport, pressures that every upper-tier authority is facing in the country. As I detailed in the previous report, the proposed council tax assumption of 4.99%, including the adult social care precept, results in an average Band D of £1,918. Importantly, this keeps North Northamptonshire in the lower half of unitary councils nationally. We're actually the 45th lowest out of 63, which is an important point of fairness and context for residents. The report also clearly explains financial sensitivities. For example, a 1% change in local council tax support costs around £127,000, and collection fund movements affect future years, not the year in which they occur. That transparency allows members to properly understand the risk. On SEND, the scale of the challenge is set out honestly. EHCP numbers have increased by 52% since 2021, with the dedicated schools grant deficit now at £19.5 million. What I support here is the response, stronger governance, an investor-save approach, and plans to expand, maintain provision of 400 places, and clear action to reduce high-cost independent placements. The budget is also properly aligned with transformation and the One Council programme, strengthened capital governance and the appointment of a Director of Transformation and Strategy in early 2026, all demonstrate a grip on delivery and not just an intention. In summary, Chair, this is a serious, evidence-based budget and financial plan. It recognises the pressures we face, explains them clearly, and sets out a realistic route through them. It demonstrates grip on risk, maturity in financial management, and a clear link between budget transformation and delivery. And for those reasons, I'm very happy to support the draft budget, medium-term financial plan and capital programme, and to move them forward to public consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cheatley. I'm looking at other members who may wish to speak. Councillor Ken Harrington and then Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I do have to say that I'm really quite blown away by this because I know the hard work and the many hours that have gone into it. It's an incredible budget. I am particularly pleased to see that 135 million are not only going into highways but transportation as well, or the infrastructure, which will maintain and improve highways, along with 44 million to expand and maintain schools, also 16 million to support and accommodate vulnerable children in care. These are all things that we should be doing. Overall, this is an extremely well thought through budget, not hurried or rushed, but well thought through. Congratulations to fellow members and of course our officers who have put so much time and effort into achieving this. Well done to everybody. Thank
you for that, Councillor Harrington. Over to Councillor Kirk Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also echo the comments that have been made about hard work of officers? This has been a Herculean effort. The speed and agility with which the entire finance team has had to work has been incredible. So genuinely, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to speak briefly, if I may, about the position of regulatory services within the budget and the medium-term financial plan. My portfolio is the smallest of all the portfolios, with a net budget of £3 million. It's also due to reduce slightly over the next 3 years. This movement reflects the shift towards full cost recovery model that's due to be rolled out across all service areas. Regulatory services may be small, but it certainly punches above its weight. It already operates with substantial income streams, and in practice is far less dependent on core funding than many other parts of the organisation. So although regulatory service isn't a net contributor, the portfolio does offset a significant portion of its gross expenditure through fees and charges. For example, there's increased income from HMO licensing, savings and income changes in areas such as the out-of-hours service, the crematorium, and penalty charge processing reduction. There are also movements within the budget driven by demand, such as reduced local land charges and reduced demand for alcohol licensing. These relatively small shifts represent a pattern across the service. Regulatory services is, I believe, commercially active, and that's evidence-based. It's constantly adjusting to real-world demand and operational conditions. This strong income base and combined with efficient service delivery means that regulatory services contributes positively to the Council's financial resilience despite its modest budget envelope. So that's regulatory services, but I would like to talk briefly about the wider financial context, as you might imagine. At full council last week, I highlighted a fact. And that is that the government's built into its national funding model an assumption that all councils in England will apply the maximum increase to council tax. I need to be clear about this because that assumption removes local discretion. It also clearly contradicts a manifesto commitment not to increase tax for working people. I find this unacceptable. Is the latest example of central government placing increased demands on local government while refusing to provide the funding to meet them. This has been the case for governments of every colour. And it continues to put us in a very, very difficult position. I don't need to tell you, Chair, that councils should be funded properly rather than relying on compulsory increases to local taxation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Chris McGiffin.
Thank you again, Chair. I, for once, will not be parochial and speak about my portfolio, merely comment on this work, this draft budget and the MTFP. I'm in substantial support, of course. It delivers a properly thought out and highly detailed draft balanced budget for 26-27. It allows for extended consultation on the impact of the budget and will indeed construct a final draft early in the new year. It recognises the substantial challenges still ahead with regard to funding and the output of the fair funding settlement and the business rates reset. The predicted growth in demand for statutory services and the deficient funding leading to these challenges, and at the risk of repeating something Councillor Harrison just said. This is an open and transparent about the increase in council tax and explains the reason for this unavoidable increase, something nobody in the authority welcomes, but as I say, we're being asked, nay instructed, to deliver services which the government does not properly fund. Finally, I support this paper because it is planning a smart use of reserves and the investment returns which help fund our services, and strongly notes that these reserves, once spent, are no longer available to support services, so the management of them is equally important to balancing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Gregory Wilcox and then Eddie MacDonald.
Chair, thank you. At its heart, the budget protects what matters most to our communities: clean streets, safe places, and a support for the voluntary and cultural life that makes Northamptonshire feel like home. It's a serious financial plan, and so am I. most of the time. But let's be honest, even I had to smile when I saw we've kept investment in public toilets. That's a real community and we care for it. I'm proud to support this budget that backs both bricks and people. Thank you.
Much for that. Councillor Eddie MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you know, we have an ageing population. Our county's population is increasing well above the national average, resulting in more people requiring support with their daily living. Half of those using adult care are basically working age people, not just older people. Let's make this clear. These services are not optional. Councils have a legal, and some would say a moral duty to provide them. You know that everything is expensive. It's getting more expensive. Materials, labour, etc. And our council, like any other business, has to absorb these costs in order to keep our services running. It may come to a surprise for some of those watching online that all funding for social care does not come directly from central government. They do provide grants, which do not come close to meeting the full cost of the services. This means that the councils have no choice but to meet the shortfall. This government have said that they will provide additional funding for adult social care, but not until 2028. Therefore, all councils will need to do the same as us and find the money for this shortfall. The current funding does not allow us to meet the needs of our most vulnerable people next year. However, this proposed budget will make this possible by investing a further £17.7 million into adult social care, raising the overall investment to £152 million, or 40% of our budget, which is the biggest area. But let me be clear, this budget is about protecting the services that matter. Care for the elderly, safeguarding children and supporting those who fall on hard times, and maintaining our frontline services. Like you, I feel the cost of living. I have no choice, in fact we have no choice, but to accept this budget to meet the needs of the people in Northamptonshire, and I support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. I'm proud to support this draft balanced budget as it proceeds through the process for scrutiny by our communities in a transparent, symbiotic manner, having first been scrutinised across the council. We have a responsive funding system whilst still supporting businesses and the growth, and progress is continuing to support and attract new business, building houses which are fit for purpose, enhance and create our area, and service delivery. Despite cost pressures, social care, including adults and social care, and adults and children's, we continue to provide and deliver frontline services which are imperative to our communities, providing financial resources to enable NNC to deliver our plans and meet corporate priorities as set out in our corporate plan. At the heart of all we do financially, we want our communities to thrive and have better, brighter futures, enabling a successful economy and creating safe and thriving places, making Northampton a great place to live, learn, work and visit. Thank you for an amazing budget, and thank you to all our staff for delivering this.
Thank you for that, Jan. Councillor Elizabeth Wright.
Thank you. So this budget reflects our clear commitment to supporting children and families, even in the face of national financial pressures. What I'm particularly pleased about in this budget is our focus on starting to work for early intervention. Yes, it's happening, but normally we're constrained by the roller coaster of budgets. We put in a service, then we might have to take it away because we don't have the funds. Early intervention is key, because if we get this right, it means that we're investing in our children and young people. And this is the first step to enabling to do that. And it's clear, and it's that commitment that we've made. So we have still got a lot of work to do. And as the other members of Exec have said, we are very much in the hands of government, especially around SEND reforms in children's. And we are waiting to see what that outcome is. But I'm particularly pleased and proud to support this draft budget before us today.
Thank you very much for that. If I could also put on record my thanks to Claire, Mark, Dean and the whole of the finance team for the hard work that they put in, especially in the last couple of weeks, because I know how difficult it has been. But I'd also like to put on record my thanks and our thanks to Councillor Graham Cheatley for the work that he has done in engaging with the whole team in just less than 8 months. But he's not alone. This executive, in my opinion, is the smartest, hardest working group of councillors I've ever been privileged to work with in nearly 20 years of local government. And I just wanted to end by saying that. Thank you ever so much, everybody. We have a mover, which is Councillor Graham Cheatley. Councillor Eddie MacDonald to second. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour? It's detailed on page 77 to 78 of the agenda pack. We have read it many times. Thank you very much.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you ever so much for that. So now we move on to agenda item 7, the housing revenue account and draft budget for 2026-2027 and the medium term financial plan, referred to as the MTFP, proposals. Councillor Lynn Buckingham, I'd like to invite you to address the meeting. Lynn, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to make your statement.
Thank you, but no longer a councillor. But thank you for the title. Sorry.
If I could change things. Anyway.
Thank you very much. Today's HRA draft budget asks tenants to shoulder a 4.8% rent increase, the maximum allowed under the social rent formula of CPI plus 1%. Textbook, compliant, tidy, but let's be blunt. When you're pulling every lever to the maximum, you owe residents absolute confidence that every pound is being used wisely, transparently and strategically. That confidence is still not fully earned. This budget leans heavily on the narrative that everything balances, but only because it assumes no new homes in 2026-27, zero. Not a single additional unit to offset the long-term revenue pressures or the loss of right-to-buy sales. 60 right-to-buy losses a year, eroding future rental income and shrinking the asset base. Voids at 1.21%, costing $500,000 in lost rent. Bad debt pressures locked at $439,000 despite universal credit rollout and cost of living pressures worsening. We're still borrowing $3.291 million a year just to service historic HRA debt and carrying $91.8 million of debt into 2027. Meanwhile, the capital programme, which tenants rely on for safe, warm, compliant homes, is riding almost entirely on depreciation and revenue contributions. If the updated stock condition survey shows bigger problems, we've got no slack. And here's the real kicker. The risk register openly says compliance with fire safety and other new regulations may increase costs, but those cost impacts are nowhere in this HRA headline narrative. Tenants are being asked to pay more now to cover gaps that we still haven't quantified. And this week I've just learnt that we are also stopping some of those fire safety checks. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room. The council hasn't yet delivered the North Northamptonshire 30-year business plan, now pushed to 26-27. Without that, we're setting rents blindfold because of the long-term affordability, viability and investment priorities of the HRA aren't visible to tenants, Scrutiny or the public. Yet we continue to raise rents at the maximum permissible rate each year, and that has a compound impact. Chair, tenants deserve honesty. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to invite Claire Edwards, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the housing revenue account budget, which is a ring-fenced account within the council's financial envelope. So this is predominantly around dealing with our housing stock for social housing. Within the proposed budget, it sets out an increase in rent of 4.8%, in line with the legislation and regulations based on CPI plus 1%, which has also been agreed as part of these budget set out in 2025 for the next 10 years. So we have seen in here that we also have consulted with the tenants around the rental setting of the increase of 4.8% within the proposals within this budget. And therefore happy to take any questions and move to the recommendations as set out in section 3 of the report.
Thank you for that. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. Councillor Graham Cheatley.
Chair, members, I welcome the Housing Revenue Account draft budget and medium-term financial plan before us, and I fully support it. This is, as Claire's mentioned, a ring-fenced account, and this report shows that the HRA is being managed responsibly, legally, and with a clear focus on tenants. It balances affordability with the very real need to invest in the safety and condition of our housing stock. The budget is built on nationally compliant rent assumptions. These are not about maximising income. They are about ensuring we have the resources to maintain homes properly, meet building safety obligations, and service historic and planned borrowing within the HRA. The report is also honest about inflationary pressures, particularly around repairs, maintenance, materials, and compliance-related works. What I do support here is the realism. Costs are recognised upfront, assumptions are cautious, and the medium-term plan does not rely on unrealistic savings that would undermine service delivery. A key strength of this report is its focus on safety and regulation. In light of the Social Housing Regulation Act and increased scrutiny around issues such as damp, mould, fire and electrical safety, the HRA clearly prioritised statutory compliance, planned maintenance and better stock condition data. That demonstrates the Council understands the changed regulatory landscape and is responding properly. On capital investment, the approach is measured and sensible. It focuses first on maintaining and improving existing homes, with borrowing kept affordable and aligned to long-term asset management plans, avoiding overstretching the HRA. Finally, I welcome the disciplined approach to reserves and risk management, ensuring the HRA can absorb shocks such as inflation or regulatory change without sudden or disruptive decisions. Chair, in summary, this HRA budget is prudent, compliant and responsible. It balances affordability for tenants with a very real need to invest in safety, compliance and the long-term condition of our housing stock. It avoids unrealistic assumptions, manages risk sensibly and reflects the new regulatory environment we are operating in. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support the HRA draft budget and medium-term financial plan and move it forward to the next stage of the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Gregory Wilcox.
Chair, thank you. The budget continues our commitment to investing in safe, decent and affordable homes across North Northamptonshire and to manage our housing stock responsibly and sustainably. I'm pleased to report that the housing revenue account remains balanced with prudent assumptions and healthy reserves to support future investment and maintain the standard of our homes. We're proposing a 4.8% rent increase in line with government guidance to make sure we can continue essential repairs, maintenance services and future-proofing of our housing stock, especially in areas like insulation, as has been said already, heating systems, health and safety compliance. I know rent increases are never welcome, and I don't enjoy them either. But neither do I enjoy leaky roofs or broken boilers. So this budget strikes the right balance between affordability and long-term responsibility, and I commend it to the executive.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much for that. Executive, in 2021, Northamptonshire Council inherited an ageing housing stock from the former Corby Borough Council and Ketchin Borough Council. This council is now investing in its priorities and its properties. We are not ceasing fire security checks. Indeed, we are stepping them up. I would like to recognise the hard work of the whole housing team, especially in the recent housing inspection that's carried out. We await the results of that report. So I just thought I should mention that. So we have a mover in Councillor Cheatley, a seconder in Councillor Gregory Wilcox. The recommendations are set out on page 245 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. May I have a show of hands for those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Louise. And so now we move on to agenda item 8, the efficiency review update. I would now like to invite Claire Edwards, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the work that's been carried out and included as part of the budget proposals around the efficiencies and saving opportunities that we could develop as the Council in providing value for money. As part of this process, we did a detailed review of the budget line by line, which is now as a product in the report that you've just heard for the budget and the MTFP across the next 4 years. There's been an extensive review of what we can include and what we've been able to identify as efficiencies. And what I'd just like to draw your attention to for 25-26, we did include efficiencies of £28 million, which we have so far to date looking on track to deliver at least 93% of those. And we're also hoping to deliver more as we go forward. We have identified in Table 2 and split down those savings that we're proposing in the budget of £21 million by each service area as a combination of savings and efficiencies and income generation. So I'd like to then move these to the recommendations or take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Claire. I would now like to invite member debate from the floor. Councillor Graham Cheatley.
Chair, members, I welcome the efficiency review update and I'm happy to support this report. Efficiency is not optional for this council. It is essential if we are to deliver a balanced budget while protecting frontline services. What I support here is that this is being treated as a structured, ongoing programme and not as a one-off savings exercise. The report confirms the council is working towards around 28.6 million of efficiencies, savings and income generation over the planning period. That reflects the scale of the challenge we face, but it's also realistic and achievable if delivered properly. Importantly, these are not blunt service cuts. The work streams focus on process improvement, better use of digital and data contract and supplier rationalisation, demand management in high-cost areas, and sensible income generation where appropriate. This is about doing things better, not simply doing less. I also welcome the strong governance around this programme. Savings are being developed, tested and tracked through officer leadership, CLT and executive, really important. Proposals are not being counted until they are credible and deliverable, which avoids the risk of booking savings too early and chasing them later. The report clearly links efficiency work to the wider One Council transformation agenda. And that matters because sustainable efficiencies come from structural change, not short-term fixes. This is increasingly being approached as an enterprise-wide programme, rather than isolated service-by-service initiatives. Finally, I welcome the realism in this update. It recognises delivery risk, It accepts that some efficiencies take time to mature and avoids over-promising before savings are proven. Chair, in summary, this efficiency review update demonstrates a serious, structured and realistic approach to delivering the savings and income this Council needs. It shows strong governance, alignment with transformation and a clear focus on sustainable efficiencies rather than short-term cuts. This is exactly the approach required to support a balanced budget and long-term financial resilience, and for those reasons I'm happy to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. No comments. Well, I'd just like to say efficiency is ongoing. We're not seeking headlines. We're getting on with business, rolling up our sleeves and delivering for the residents of North Northamptonshire who put us here. It is one of the reasons that we were elected on May the 1st, and I'm extremely proud of the work we've done today. But guess what? We've only just begun. I'll pass over now to Councillor Chris McGiffin.
Who is about to repeat almost word for word precisely what you've just said. This is an excellent piece of work. It's a challenge for me because in my portfolio it stretches the nature of the work that we do and challenges us in terms of KPIs and process and material science and all those things that we know will add to our ability to deliver more for less. It's precisely what we were elected for, as Martin has alluded to. The identified savings are impressive. In my own portfolio, they're expected to see this year savings of 12.2%, about 3.5 million, with 2.7 million already in the bank. Thank you, Claire. We continue to work internally with our brilliant officers. Just pause to think about that. Brilliant officers. And with expert advisors on many fronts. For instance, the initiatives put into place for travel to school are expected to yield a 7-figure savings in 26-27 and beyond thereafter, as part of a wider, large savings plan for this portfolio beyond then. I support and commend the work done on this report to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we have a mover in Councillor Graham Cheatley, a seconder in Councillor Chris McGiffin. The recommendations are set out on page 264 and in the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I have a show of hands for those in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you ever so much. I'm going to ask that we take a short break of 5 minutes and then we'll move on to agenda item 9 on our return. Thank you. So we'll resume the meeting at agenda item 9, the Corporate Strategic Risk Register. I'd now like to invite Claire Edwards, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce this report. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides members with an update on the Council's Strategic Risk Register. I'd like you to take you to section 4.4, which highlights some of the changes that have happened since the last time it has come here. So just to sort of look at table 1, we have risk 22, which has been removed, risk 19, which has been removed, risk 24 is a new entry around a risk associated with public switch telephone network being decommissioned and a potential impact on council services, and an update on risk 16 to include inherent risk arising from recognised potential risk of exposure of non-controls that are in place around health and safety. So that's the only updates that we have, and they are attached in Appendix A to C. Otherwise, I'm happy to note the recommendations and take any questions.
Thank you ever so much for that. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. Councillor Graham Cheatley.
Chair, members, I welcome the updated Corporate Strategic Risk Register, and I'm happy to support this report. This is not a theoretical document. It is a clear, honest assessment of the risks that could genuinely prevent this council from delivering its statutory duties, its financial plans and its corporate plan objectives. What I particularly support is the realism of the risk profile. The register shows a small number of very high risks and a wider group of high risks, including SEND pressures, financial sustainability, health and safety, housing compliance, capital delivery and organisational capacity. This is not a weakness. It reflects the reality facing upper tier authorities across the country. From a finance perspective, it's important that financial risk is explicitly recognised. The register clearly links demand-led pressures, DSG exposure and funding uncertainty to robust mitigations, including close budget monitoring, regular MTFP reviews, strengthening capital governance and clear executive oversight. Risk management and financial planning are properly joined up. On SEND, the risk is rightly scored as high, reflecting the scale and pace of demand growth. What reassures me is the response. A SEND accountability board, invest-to-save models, expansion of maintained provision and alignment with the medium-term financial plan and national engagement. That shows grip, not denial. The register also appropriately highlights health, safety and housing compliance risks, particularly in light of increased regulation. Strong mitigations are in place, including a clear director-level ownership, audits, inspections, corporate landlord arrangements, and regular reporting to leadership and members. Safety is being treated as a core corporate risk. Finally, I support the governance around this register. Risks are owned, they're reviewed, scored consistently, and escalated where necessary. This gives executive real visibility and control. Chair, in summary, this is a robust and credible corporate strategic risk register. It reflects the real challenges facing the Council, aligns closely with our financial and service pressures, and demonstrates that risks are being actively managed with clear accountability. It provides executive and members with a solid basis for oversight and decision-making. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Graham. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Kirk Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything Councillor Cheatley's just said. That's not the end of what I would like to say. I've been working in and around risk management with my internal audit professionals hat on for quite some time. I think this council has an excellent approach to risk management. I did want to just take a moment to draw out the methodology behind our approach to risk management, because I think it's important to understand the discipline that sits behind the scores. So each risk's that we have begins with a fairly clear description. Officers will then assess the impact and the likelihood of that score, and they will produce an inherent score for that risk. It's generally followed by a summary of the key controls and mitigations for that risk. And once those have been considered, a residual score is then recorded on the register. That's the score that reflects the present day position rather than the hypothetical worst case, which is what the descriptor allows. For me, there are two really important parts of the register. The first one is the sources of assurance. That provides the audit trail, if you like. It gives us confidence about where the assurance is coming from and how each risk risk is being managed and how it's evidenced. The second one is the list of additional actions required. These are the steps to reduce the risk further and to create the conditions for continuous improvement. Now, some organisations, they also adopt a target score on the end of it. So you'll see another score that is ultimately a target. That's what those actions are actually looking to reduce the score to. It obviously reflects the future mitigations. Now, that's really helpful, but it can make the document unwieldy. So ultimately, I think the format we have here probably strikes the right balance. In terms of other things to highlight from the report, it is worth noting there is one extremely red risk. We've just talked about it. It's the risk of overspend. There are a couple of others relate loosely to budget pressures, risk 7 notably. But what's really notable about the overspend risk, which is risk 8, is that the inherent score and the residual score are both the same. So we have a plethora of mitigating actions, but unfortunately the risk is still extremely high. Also wanted to highlight the addition of risk 24, simply because it relates to business continuity and emergency planning. They both sit under my portfolio. It relates to the public telephone switch network, which is due to be switched off shortly. Sits under my portfolio. I am discussing it with officers regularly as work continues. There's also a more generic business continuity risk, and that's risk 4, and that's relevant to the council as a whole, but obviously naturally has a link to my portfolio. Both are being monitored closely. So on that basis, Leader, I'm pleased to second this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any members wish to speak? Councillor Jan O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. I just really would like to say that I'm pleased to support the continuing and evolving work on our corporate strategic risk register, which ensures we are utilising funds appropriately and continue to use outside funding and Section 106 monies in a timid and innovative manner. The work that our officers have done on this is exemplary and conveys a fantastic audit trail, and I think we should commend all our officers and everybody that's worked on this. It's absolutely fantastic and gives me great confidence in that we will be a council that will come out on top in all that we do and obviously be a council of choice for future employees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. I'd also like to applaud Councillor Kirk Harrison. The unsung portfolio, to be fair, but no, a fantastic job that you are doing in that role. So we have a proposer in Councillor Graham Cheatley and I believe a seconder in Councillor Kirk Harrison. The recommendations are set out on page 270 of the agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Please may I see those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Louise. So we move on to agenda item 10, which is the Capital Programme Update 2025-2026. I'd now like to invite Lynn Buckingham to address the meeting. Lynn, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's get straight to the business critical headline. This capital programme update may look routine, but what it exposes is a system under strain. Inflation risks, delivery risks and financial fragility, all humming beneath the dashboard. First, tonight we're being asked to approve 163,000 for Castle Theatre lighting, funded entirely from capital assets. No objection to investing in, cultural assets, but we can't ignore the bigger governance point. This is the only item before executive, while a long list of schemes is being signed off elsewhere under delegated authority. Residents won't understand why millions can be moved around without elected oversight, and frankly, neither should we. Second, those Section 106 funded projects and minor grant items are welcome, but they also highlight a growing challenge. Developers across the country are increasingly attempting to downgrade or delay their Section 106 obligations by raising viability concerns. That might suit their spreadsheets, but it leaves communities shortchanged. These contributions exist to offset the impact of development, schoolworks, libraries, play areas, local facilities. If developers chip away at agreements after the fact, the cost doesn't disappear, it simply shifts as the council and ultimately residents. We need absolute assurance that Section 106 funded capital schemes are being protected from post-agreement dilution. Third, the reprofiling of the Northampton Children's Trust accommodation and condition works budgets is a red flag. Shifting major spend to 2026 to 2028 is in reality a pressure release because of the market is too hot to deliver on time or on budget. The report itself openly acknowledges that inflation, material shortages and contractor pressures could force scope reductions to avoid overspends. Residents deserve clarity. The capital programme is becoming harder to land cleanly, and unless we grip this early, we risk a rolling cycle of delay. Fourth, on finance, yes, there's no new borrowing, which is one of the rare green shoots here, but rising interest rates are now a strategic risk that could force future programme reductions. That means we can't afford slippage or optimistic scheduling. We need precision and honesty about deliverability. Capital investment is more than bricks and procurement, it's trust. If projects stall or shrink, if children's trust offices sit in planning limbo, or if Section 106 schemes get squeezed by developer pressure, it's communities who pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to invite Claire Edwards, Executive Director of Finance, to introduce the Capital Programme update.
Thank you, Chair. So this report before you today provides an update on the capital programme, and outlined in section 5 of the report. It notes additional changes to the capital programme as for the Castle Theatre, in particular for lighting of £163,000, and it also identifies in a transparent manner all the other items that have been approved through delegation for Section 106 grant funding, and also in moving budgets around that don't affect the overall envelope of the budget, but need to be noted and executive need to be made aware of. So this does provide transparency in some of those movements that have happened within the capital programme, and will continue to be reported in this manner, and will therefore also be included in the capital monitoring report as we go forward for the rest of the financial year. Otherwise, I'm happy to take the recommendations or any questions in relation to this report. If I may just take one moment also to thank my team. As you have seen today, that the raft of reports that we have produced is from the finance section, and I would like to offer my thanks to my team in producing these reports, as it has been a monumental task. And what you have seen today is a product of the diligent and professional work that's undertaken by officers to produce the reports today that culminate over months of work and carry on over the whole year into then our monitoring platform as well. So I just want to say thank you to the team of officers that have helped and support myself in delivering these reports to you members today. So thank you.
And thank you and your team. I'd now like to invite member debate from the floor. Councillor Graham-Cheatley for probably the last time, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just reiterate exactly what Claire said as well? It is a whole team effort. And also thank you to you for giving me all of the briefings and keeping me up to speed and up to date. It's really appreciated. Chair, members, I welcome the capital programme update and I'm happy to support this report. This update is important because capital delivery is one of the areas where councils can very quickly lose financial control if governance is weak. What this report demonstrates is that grip on capital has materially improved. We now have stronger governance arrangements in place, including the Strategic Capital Board and Themed Capital Boards, with clear senior responsible officers, defined escalation routes and regular reporting to executive. That structure matters, particularly given ongoing pressures from inflation, borrowing costs and construction market volatility. From a finance perspective, I welcome the emphasis on affordability and control. Capital schemes are being assessed not just on delivery, but on their revenue impact, borrowing costs and long-term maintenance liabilities, with changes brought back to executive rather than drifting through informal adjustments. That discipline protects the medium-term financial plan. The report also shows improved risk management. Project risks are being actively monitored, high-risk schemes receive enhanced oversight, and internal and external assurance is built into the process. Issues are being identified early, not after the fact. I also support the growing focus on benefits realisation and value for money. Projects are increasingly required to be clear about what they will deliver, how success will be measured, and how they align with corporate plan priorities. That is essential if we are to justify capital investment to residents. Finally, the report is honest about delivery capacity, and I welcome the steps being taken to strengthen programme management and reduce fragmentation across services. Chair, in summary, this capital programme update demonstrates a much stronger grip on capital delivery. It shows improved governance, clearer accountability, better financial discipline, and a focus on value for money. At a time when capital risk is one of the biggest threats to council finances, this approach is exactly what executive should expect, and for those reasons I'm happy to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other members wish to add anything? Councillor Gregory Wilcox.
Chair, thank you. This capital update includes several smaller but very meaningful projects that strengthen our local communities. From improvements to Rothwell and Wollaston libraries to upgrades at Rothwell sports facilities and the Stoke Albany play area. These are the things that help turn streets into neighbourhoods and neighbourhoods into communities. I'm particularly pleased that they are being funded through 106 contributions and external grants. Good value for money, locally focused. And I'd just like to say anybody who thinks capital budgets aren't exciting clearly hasn't tried finding a working spotlight in the Castle Theatre. So I'm all for the lighting upgrade too. I'm happy to support this report.
Councillor Kirk Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't actually planning to speak on this item, but I just wanted to say a few words in support and defence of the scheme of financial delegation. The scheme has obviously been considered and approved by full council, which is important. I don't think there's a democratic deficit there at all. In fact, it's one of the few things that are subject to really robust governance processes. I said one of the few things, one of the many things that are subject to those processes. I think the scheme of delegation is important. It provides agility of decision making. I think officers need to be able to make decisions on spending day to day. Where they're beyond those thresholds, they are clearly subject to escalation. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Ken Harrington.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I echo everything that I've just heard, actually, but I think we will have achieved, as mentioned in 3.2, the reasons for recommending our objectives, which are, of course, as listed there, green sustainable environment, better, brighter futures, safe and thriving places, connected communities, and above all, and maybe to me the most important, is active and fulfilled lives. Overall, I think the scheme provides a strategic fit with the Council's priorities as set out within the corporate plan. I support everything it says. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ken. And over to Councillor Elizabeth Wright.
Chair, thank you. So I'm delighted to see continued investment in the infrastructure that supports children and families across North Northamptonshire. The capital programme updates include welcome schemes such as Weldon Village Primary, Section 106 project, additional funding for Urchester Primary and targeted investment through the Family Hubs grant, all of which help us to respond to the growing and ongoing changing needs of our communities. It is also reassuring to see progress on the Children's Trust office accommodation and the condition works, which are essential to ensuring that our staff are operating in fit-for-purpose spaces to deliver services safely and effectively. Going on from Councillor Cheatley's comments, one of the things that I'm doing as part of that Schools Capital programme is having monthly briefings with the Schools Capital project team in which we can ensure that all the capital investment decisions that we're making are being delivered in a timely way and on target. So these investments are around bricks and mortar. They are about building our capacity for our children and young people. So I support the recommendations in this report.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Chris McGiffin.
Thank you again, Chair. Can I just open by lending some comfort to the Speaker around Section 106? None of us like giving Section 106 money back, and I just want to highlight that. At a recent scrutiny, a developer attempted to dilute his commitment with regard to building at Stanton Cross, was roundly rejected by the Planning Committee in order that he can stand by his obligations to provide those items that were agreed to at the point of original planning permission. Look, in lending support to this capital programme update, I welcome the details laid out, especially regarding Section 106 and the grant spending without cost to taxpayer. Supporting our libraries, schools and family hubs have been mentioned, and where we do use budget drawdown, I welcome the details around the refurbishment of owned great buildings. Like Swanspool House, an example of investor save. In this case, we'd have to spend money on renting property in order to accommodate those offices, as Councillor Wright detailed there. It's an excellent example of a carefully considered capital programme, and I commend it to the Executive.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so pleased to support this programme. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. I agree with all my fellow councillors. It exemplifies the care and support we have for our communities in updating facilities like the theatre, our sports facilities, our play areas, and maybe even one day we'll even do something better for paddleboarding as well. Had to get that in there. We're enhancing our libraries and thereby ensuring we help expand and support our residents' physical and mental capabilities, which in turn conveys our passion to look after our communities' health and well-being. The capital programme is transformational, and I would wish to commend our officers for all the work in supporting our communities and for their outward and upward actions to make North Northants the place to live, evolve and thrive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Well, anybody listening from home that's got good hearing can probably hear a lot of people enjoying themselves at a pantomime in the Cube today. And as leader of the Borough Council of Wellingborough, along with Councillor Ken Harrington, I would add, I was extremely proud of the part that we played to keep the Castle Theatre in Wellingborough open. It's an integral part of that community, and an asset that is owned by Northamptonshire Council and needs to be invested in. And you wouldn't be surprised, as the person that laid the very first brick on Stanton Cross, the urban extension, and watched the bridge drop into place on a very stormy day some years ago. I am absolutely clear that we must make sure that our developers uphold the responsibility to deliver infrastructure that goes with development in the relevant trigger points that take place in those urban extensions. So I thought I'd put that bit in, and thank you. I have a mover then in Graham Cheatley. Can I take Councillor Chris McGiffin as the seconder? Can we have a show of hands for all those in favour of the item at 284 of the report?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you ever so much for that. Not an urgent item of business, but I thought that I would say a few words to the executive. So, as I've said before, Northamptonshire is served by five MPs. Sarah Ball for Beaujeu, Wollaston and other villages, Jen Kitchen for Urchester, Wellingborough, Rushden and other locations, Stuart Andrew for Isham, Harrowden, Allingbury, Olsbarton and Sywell, Rosie Writing for Kettering, Burton Latimer, Barton Seagrave, Rothwell and Desborough, and Lee Barron for Corby, East Northants and our friends in Thrapston and Oundle. We are proud to be delivering a successful, innovative council that serves our residents by delivering all services in a unified way. In Northamptonshire, we have embraced and delivered on the government's priorities. We have delivered significant growth of 13.5% compared to 5.5% nationally, supporting the government's growth agenda. We have worked positively with our government-imposed Children's Trust to improve children's lives and keep them safe. We have made around £90 million of efficiency savings since vesting day, and we have delivered joined-up services for our residents. We believe that we exemplify why unitary councils are models for success, and we continue to support government by sharing our experience and our learning. However, this feels a bit like a one-way street. We still have limited infrastructure funding that we have seen handed out nationally, and those authorities that have a devolution deal. We're still waiting for the much-needed funding for our hospital in Kettering. We're still completely underfunding for the growing needs of our residents in adults and children's social care and, of course, highways. Governments are demanding more and more of our business rates that we have generated to be returned to them. The majority of our funding comes from government, business rates and council tax. This year, we have patiently waited for government to tell us how they have allocated funding to us for the next 3 years. This is called fair funding. Fair funding was the opportunity for the government to distribute funding based on the actual need of our communities, rather than historic allocations. For our council, it was the chance for government to review our data, our growth, and our need, and fund us accordingly. However, we are deeply disappointed that despite early indications that our council funding would support us to be financially sustainable, our funding is likely to be one of the worst of all county unitary councils as a result of recent changes to the funding formula, which differed to that was originally consulted on by government. For clarity, the government said that they would use a certain formula to work out how to fund us. They consulted local government on it, and then they changed their mind and the formula. The latest change moved funding from rural areas, such as ours, to metropolitan areas. The recent changes by government disproportionately affect county unitaries, the very councils, such as ours, that have supported the government's agenda time and time again. The very councils that this government seeks to introduce across the entire country. Let's be clear, if government do not fund us correctly, our residents will pay either through reduced services or through increased council tax. Government must fund us better and not expect our residents to pay for their decisions not to. I will not rest until they do. We must continue to lobby as a council, and our MPs must lobby for us too. I'm grateful for the support of Lee Bowen MP, who has proactively reached out to us and is doing that today. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of the agenda. I thank those members, officers and the public who have been in attendance, including those who have watched online via the YouTube channel. Best wishes to you all for the festive season. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.